The New York Rangers are one of many teams right now that are going to be in a very tight race for the last wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference. The top spot is definitely still up for grabs, kind of, but the Ottawa Senators have it pretty firmly in their grasp right now. They're quite a few points up on the Rangers, Montreal, Columbus, Detroit, Islanders, Boston, all the teams that are fighting for those wildcard spots right now. They're quite a few points up on now. They're 7-2-1 their last 10. They're on a 6-game winning streak. They've got games in hand on a couple teams behind them as well. So Ottawa is in a very good spot right now to more than likely kind of keep that number one wildcard spot. But that second one is definitely still up for grabs, and there are quite a few teams, like I mentioned just now, the Rangers, Montreal, Columbus, Detroit, New York Islanders, and Boston are pretty much all kind of still in the mix. Now, maybe you don't necessarily count a team like Boston at this point, but every other team that I mentioned are pretty much still in the mix there. There's still 5 teams that have a fairly realistic chance at possibly getting that last wildcard spot. And one of those 5 teams could definitely catch the Ottawa Senators for that top wildcard spot. But like I said, it's pretty unlikely, especially with how they're playing. They'd have to fall off pretty massively, and they're on a heater right now, so it's quite unlikely. But with the Rangers being one of those teams in the mix, we're going to kind of talk about how this wildcard race is going to shape out here, what the Rangers kind of need to do over the next couple games here, who they play, who's been good, who's been bad, and just kind of really break down this New York Rangers team, as well as we'll talk a bit about that 3-1 kind of disappointing loss to the Edmonton Oilers as well from Sunday night. And before we get started, if you do enjoy this video, definitely don't forget to click that like and subscribe button, as it does help the channel out a ton, and I would really appreciate it, and it's also free to do. But taking a look now at kind of what happened in that 3-1 loss against the Edmonton Oilers, we kind of break down this game quickly here, not talk too long about it, but just kind of mention a bit here, as it was a bit of a disappointing loss. I think it was a fairly close game for the most part there. I wouldn't say the Oilers kind of dominated. Now, you could say they definitely had a bit more pressure at moments on the Rangers than the Rangers did on them, but the Rangers ended up actually having more expected goals for in that game, having 1.91 compared to an expected goals against, which is obviously the expected goals for the Oilers, of just 1.61. So Rangers losing 3-1 there. Not an ideal loss, obviously. The Rangers really need to get every single possible point they can get with how tight that wild card race is in the Eastern Conference for that second spot there. There's 5 teams kind of competing for one spot right now, so the Rangers really kind of desperately need to get as many points as possible, especially with how tight these teams are, because all these teams right now, all 5 are pretty much within like 2 or 3 points at the very most pretty much. So it's very tight. It's going to be close, and you got to win a lot of these games here down the stretch. There's about 14 games left for the Rangers, so every single possible point is so important. And when you play such a close game for the most part there, I mean, it's 1-0 after the first, then 1-1 after the second going into the third, and then you give up 2 in the third there, and you lose 3-1, and it definitely was not the best overall performance by Igor Shesterkin in net. He ended up allowing 3 goals on 23 total shots, so definitely wasn't his best game. And especially his last couple goals during the third period, maybe you'd like to see him have at least one of those, ideally. But I think when you go into this game, though, you're playing the Edmonton Oilers. You're going up against Skinner, who obviously has been pretty up and down and definitely is an inconsistent goalie. He's not a guy who is definitely a consistently just good goalie. He definitely has some moments when he is playing great, and in this one, he played quite good. But I think he's just a very inconsistent goalie, not the best one in the world. So you really kind of need to be able to score more than 1 goal, especially when you're playing the Oilers there. They're going to have a pretty good offense, having Leon Draisaitl, McDavid, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They've got some really talented players there. So you got to try and, score at least more than 1 goal there. Obviously, they don't. The Rangers lose 3-1 there. Wasn't the best performance defensively by this team. Maybe not. There were a couple not great penalties, you could say, and maybe some of them were a little soft calls as well. I know some fans were talking about that, but at the end of the day there, you really got to stay out of the box against the Oilers there, and you also have to score more than 1 goal in a game against them, because they're going to be more than likely scoring at least a couple, so only scoring 1 is more likely going to lose you the game against them. And now talking about some of the players who I think as of late have done pretty good or maybe kind of bad for the most part there, though. Alexis Lafreniere, I think as of late over the last kind of little bit here, I think he started to kind of turn his game back up a little bit, which is quite nice to see. And for Artemi Panarin, who is the Rangers' highest paid player as of late and in the month of March, he does have 9 games played. He's on a 9-game point streak. He's got 13 total points in the month of March there over that 9-game point streak. He has been on fire as of late, which is exactly what you want to see out of your top paid player. He's the highest paid guy in this team, and him producing when things are starting to really matter here is exactly what you want to see. As of this season, he's definitely had some quiet moments here and there for sure, where he hasn't done a whole lot at moments, but as of late, late, he has really started to heat up, which this is the exact time you need to do it. I mean, the Rangers are right now in a very tight race, so having your top paid player kind of starting to really produce, especially with this team kind of lacking some offense as of late, I think this could be a really big thing for this Rangers team. And now for Will Cooley, who I think throughout this entire season so far has been a pretty good, consistent player. He obviously has taken a pretty nice step up from last season there in his development after his rookie season, which was a pretty decent one, not a bad one at all. Obviously, playing that physical role, just didn't put up a ton of points. This season, we're still seeing that physical game. We're seeing a decent defensive player as well. He's not bad at all defensively, but he's also bringing a lot more offensively, which is exactly what I was hoping for out of Will Cooley this season, and he's done that so far in the month of March as well. In the 9 games played in March, he does have 6 points there, which is not bad at all in 9 games played. He's got 2 goals, 4 assists. He's a +2, only 2 penalty minutes as well, which is quite nice. He's not taking a lot of penalties, and he also is, of course, being that physical force out there. He has 28 hits in the month of March there, averaging a little bit over 3 hits per game, which is not bad at all. This is a very physical player. He can bring some offense as well. I think this is a really nice guy, and hopefully could end up getting a nice long extension this upcoming offseason. We'll see what happens there. He might want to go for more of a shorter term kind of bridge deal. We'll see what happens with Will Cooley, but I think he is definitely going to be a long-term core piece for this Rangers team, and he's exactly the type of player this team needs more of, as he does bring a lot of physicality, but can also produce points and also be a pretty solid defensive winger. And for Matt Rempe, as of late, he may not be putting up a ton of points, but I still think he's been playing pretty solid and definitely looks quite improved from last season, where at moments he was a bit of a defensive liability, made some bad turnovers in the defensive zone, missed a lot of passes at moments, and, skating just didn't look the best. But this season, I think he's taken some big steps up in his game, and I think we're really starting to see him kind of help produce a little more offensively with this team and, be a pretty decent defensive forward at moments. He's not going to be some shutdown guy, obviously, but I think he's been much improved from last season in pretty much all areas of his game, which is exactly what you want to see out of a young player who is definitely still a pretty raw player. I mean, you take a look at his size there, 6'8". He's obviously got some more room to grow and kind of get better and really refine his skills, I think. So if you give him another year or two, I think we could still see a lot more improvements from him. I don't think he's ever going to be a true kind of top 6 or even top 9 guy, but I still think he can be a very solid fourth liner for this Rangers team for quite a few years. And someone of his kind of skill set, it's pretty unique there. You don't see a lot of guys at his size there who's that fast, who can also help create a few scoring chances here and there and also play a decent defensive game and not be a complete liability. So I think he's been pretty solid as of late and is definitely a guy to keep an eye on going forward, as he could be a very nice piece for this Rangers team for quite a few years. Next up here, we've got another young guy in Brennan Othmann, who unfortunately has not been able to get his first point in the NHL. He's got 11 games played this season, no points, had a little bit of a sample size last season with this team, didn't produce a point, but I'm sure one will come at some point throughout the rest of this season. And also, he is playing a pretty solid defensive game and also is bringing a bit physically. So I definitely think it's deserving to keep his spot on this Rangers team. And another guy here who I think has really been playing good as of late is Mika Zibanejad. In the month of March, he only had 7 points there, which is not bad at all, but it's obviously not like he's been producing at an insane level. But the main thing I think we're seeing with Mika Zibanejad is he's kind of, locking in maybe a little more now and is starting to be a lot more physical. He's got 13 hits in the month of March in those 9 games played. And you may say that it's just under 1.5 hits per game, and that's not that much. But this is a guy who total this entire season up until the month of March, so in October, November, December, January, and February, he had a total of 22 hits in the entire season up until the month of March, where now he already has 13 in those 9 games played. So I think it's pretty clear he is starting to take a bit of a step up in his all-around game. He's starting to be more physical, which we have wanted to see out of a guy like Mika Zibanejad for quite some time. He's got that size, so him starting to be more physical is really good. He's also buying in a little more on the defensive game, which I think is great to see. And now for a couple players who I don't think have been that great as of late is Zach Jones and Urho Vakanainen. I just think defensively, they haven't been phenomenal. And also, the penalties that Zach Jones has taken over the last few games here just have not been great. And in the last 3 games Zach Jones has played there against Edmonton, Columbus, and Minnesota, he has a total of 5 minor penalties and had 3 of them against Minnesota. Now, the Rangers did win 2 of those games there, the 4-0 win against Columbus, the 3-2 win against Minnesota, so the Rangers still have come up with the points for the most part there. But that's still 5 minor penalties that he has taken there. And I think most of them have been quite easily avoidable as well. Just kind of some bad penalties at moments, kind of stupid ones. So I really hope he can kind of figure that out there and take less penalties, because this team constantly being on the PK, and this team has taken a lot of penalties, it feels like, over the last few games here. I know the ones against Matt Rempe, I'm not talking about those ones because a couple of those were definitely the just straight up wrong calls. I'm not going to dive too much into that, but those were some wrong calls against Matt Rempe. But the main thing here is Zach Jones, I just think, has taken way too many penalties. I mean, 5 minor penalties in the last 3 games is not good at all, especially when you're in a big fight here for the playoffs. Every single point matters so much. And, the Rangers, how many penalties they took there in this game against Edmonton. I know they all maybe weren't the best calls, maybe you could say, and some of them were maybe a little iffy. I just think in general, though, this team needs to do a much better job of staying out of the box. And now taking a look at the upcoming schedule here over the next 6 games or so, the Rangers will play the Calgary Flames, Toronto Maple Leafs, Vancouver Canucks, LA Kings, Anaheim Ducks, and San Jose Sharks. And if we're being honest here, that San Jose game and the Anaheim game need to be 2 points in each of them. They have to be. You cannot drop any points against some bottom tier teams. They're both bad teams, nowhere near playoffs. They're not good, and this Rangers team just cannot afford to drop points against some just not great teams. With how tight this race is right now, and with some teams having some games played in hand on the Rangers as well, it's definitely not the best spot to be in. So I think this team desperately just needs to come away with all 4 points in those 2 games there. It's a Friday-Saturday kind of combo there. You got the Friday game, 10 p.m. against the Ducks there, and then the Saturday the next day, 10:30 p.m. there against the Sharks. You got to come out with all 4 points. The Kings game, Leafs game, Flames game, they're all going to be really tough games there, so hopefully the Rangers can still pull through with some points there. At least you like to see this team kind of pull off at least 2 of those 3 wins there. And then Vancouver as well, I think, is also going to be a not obviously easy game, but obviously not going to be a super tough one either. It's not like they're as good as some of the other teams the Rangers are playing here over the next few games here, but they're also not as bad as teams like the San Jose Sharks and Anaheim Ducks. Anyways, though, thank you all so much for watching today's video. If you have enjoyed, definitely don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content, as I do post every single day at 9 a.m., as well as definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on the New York Rangers. Who do you think's been good? Who do you think's been bad? And what are your thoughts on this kind of playoff race here, the wild card race? It's going to be tough. There's still kind of, 5 teams kind of fighting for one wildcard spot. Do you think the Rangers are going to make it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'll catch you next one, and let's go Rangers.